Greetings, traveler. Have you ever been in a situation where you're looking at a skill tree and all the options look good, and because they all look good, you just don't know which one to pick? Today, I'm going to be sharing with you my two-step framework for navigating these situations, not just when playing video games and dealing with skill trees, but also when dealing with the many options that we have in game design. So I'm going to give you a simple example for the first step and another one for the second step. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 13 years now, and choosing how to allocate my time, which features to include in a game, which features to leave for later on, for expansions and so on, and how to pick between the options in such a way that it makes sense not just to me but to the rest of the team has been very core to my job basically ever since the beginning. So let me give you some context for the examples I'm going to use today to illustrate this two-step decision process. So before talking about game design and that side of things, let's just talk about looking at a skill tree and seeing all the options that are available for the next step and trying to figure out which to choose from these. So for this sample, we have a game which is just a sample action RPG game. You have different weapons to choose to fight enemies with your character. And you arrive at a point in the skill tree where you have to make a decision. So let's jump into that first example and look at what this situation might look like. So this is something you might typically come up against when you're dealing with a skill tree. So you arrive at this node in the skill tree, and then the node expands to 3 nodes, and the game offers you the option of going with the bow and increasing its damage, assuming that all of these are available to you already, or going with increasing the damage for the dagger, or going with increasing the damage for the axe. Now here we have the assumption that all the weapons in this game have the same potential. So it's not one of those games where that, one weapon is the weapon and everything else is just a waste of time. This is just an basically equal opportunity kind of game. So we come up to this point, and the bow has very little damage increase seemingly here. It's not such a big increase. The dagger gives more, and the axe node gives even more damage. So we look at this, and our instinct as humans is, well, this is more, plus axes sound like they do a lot of damage, so I should pick this one, right? Perhaps. The tricky thing about this situation is that it doesn't give you enough information and enough context to make a decision with. You just don't know everything just by looking at these 3 numbers. So here you might think, well, I should go with the axe, but I'm not really using the axe, I'm just using the bow all the time. And then you decide to dive deeper into the parameters of the game, and this is one very crucial step you can take to start quantifying your options. So go beyond what the game is showing you and not just taking it at face value, and just thinking through the option and what would be best for you in this point in time, not just what the game is presenting you with. So let's say you dive a little deeper and you try to figure out what the actual attack values are, or rather damage values are, of these weapons right now, so you can make sense of them applying the bonus. So after diving into the game and getting the real damage values of all these weapons, we might come up with this situation that the current damage for the bow is actually 300, and for the dagger it's been just 100, and for the axe it's 160. If we apply these modifiers to the base damage that these weapons have right now, this is the values that we'll come up with. So the bow will actually start doing 330 damage total, the dagger will do 130, and the axe will do 240. So even though the axe gets the biggest benefit out of this node in the skill tree, overall we see that the bow, because of its high current damage, will still end up doing the most damage right now. And this is just some really, really good context to have to make this decision. Now, even so, we see that this initial value pointed at the fact that probably the axe is the best choice. But now that we have the current damage value as well, the situation points to the bow being the best choice. And here comes the first step in my decision framework that says, well, you know what? This is all good, but I don't like using the bow and I don't like using the axe. The dagger has all these other utilities and hidden properties and high attack speed or whatever. And even though it has a very low damage here, when we do this calculation, I just prefer using it more for this particular character, for this situation, because I'm getting a better performance out of it overall. So the first step in this decision framework is basically ignore all the other options that are not in line with your direction in what you want to do right now. So if you have decided that the dagger is the weapon you want to go with for this playthrough of the game with this particular character, then all the other options are basically just sand in the eyes. It's just an illusion to chase. It's just some option, some shining thing to take your attention away from the fact that, look, maybe this option is not the strongest in this moment in time, but if you keep working on it, this will have way more returns than learning how to use the bow or switching to the axe or any other option that the game might present you with in the future. And again, we make the assumption that in this case, all weapons have the same potential. And usually that's the case for most games, although I know some games out there like to favor one particular weapon over the others, because that's the story these games want to say. They want to say that, look, in this situation, this is best. But for our case, we assume that they all have the same potential. So that's it for step one. Really, really keeping in mind that my choice for this playthrough has been, in this case, the dagger, and I should stick with it no matter what sort of shiny opportunity the game throws at me, is the first step to building up a stronger and stronger character despite all the distractions. So let's jump to step 2 and example 2. Okay, so in the second example, we apply the second step of the framework. And the second step says, well, all of our options are good. They're all in the direction that we want to go. But how do we choose the one that will give us the best return, the highest return at this moment in time? So in the second example, the tree looks like this. You finished from the last node where you made sure that the damage of the dagger is now 130. And for the next 3 nodes, you have an increase to attack speed of plus 10%, which looks good. You can add fire damage of plus 5 to your attacks, which also looks good. And finally, you can increase your critical chance by 30%, which again sounds good. So in this case, where all of the options sound pretty good, how do we choose? So for the second step, after we've confirmed that this is in the direction that we want, in the same option that we want to use in this case, this is a case of quantifying each option with basic math to see which one will give us the best return in this case. And again, remember that all of these look good, so upon first look, there's just no way of knowing which one is the best. We need to find out exactly what each one of these mean. So for the attack speed, it will give us plus 10%. So we will do 10% more attacks. An easy way to visualize this is saying that in the time span it would take us to make 10 attacks before, now we can make 11. So because we can do one more attack in the same time frame, essentially we have 10% more damage. So our base is 130 plus 10%. The new total would be 143 damage on average if we take this option. The second one is easy. If we just add 5 fire damage to each one of the attacks, then our new attack simply becomes 135. And finally, we have the tricky one, critical chance. Now, I love when games mention the term critical chance because they never explain exactly what the critical hit rate is. Like, is it happening all the time? Is it never happening? And so on. And they also never explain what's the damage increase you can expect in a critical. Do you get 10% more damage in a critical? Do you get 50% more damage? Do you get twice the damage or 10 times the damage? It's just not mentioned immediately. You have to go and dig it up from somewhere. Sometimes it's not mentioned anywhere in the game, and you have to basically look it up on the internet and find out somebody who calculated the formula through backwards engineering and shared it. So in this case, we have the game where the critical a critical hit will do twice the damage of a normal attack. And an easy way to understand this 30% increase is to say that, look, if I do 10 hits, this is the increase I'm expected to get. So the hits that have the increased damage from the critical are going to be increased by 130. So the increase I'm going to get in damage in the hits that do have a critical is plus 130 damage, since criticals do twice the damage. So it's only 30% of them. So over 10 hits, 3 of them will get the increase and the rest will get zeros. So if we do 10 hits in a row and we get 30% critical hit rate, this is the damage increase we expect to get. But we don't know if a critical is gonna happen on our next hit or on any given hit. So how can we know the average increase in damage we can expect from 30% crit rate? Well, to normalize this, sometimes occurring critical damage, all we need to do is normalize it and say, well, over 10 hits, this is the damage increase we expect to get. Only 3 of them will get the increase. So 130, 260, 390 divided by 10 hits that we needed to get this damage increase out of, then we simply end up with 39 damage increase overall over our base damage. So now that we have this number, we just add it to the base damage we do right now. And this is the result we end up with. So after calculating everything, we saw that with the 10% speed increase, we can expect an average, our damage to go up by this much. So we'll have 143 damage. If we take the fire damage option, we'll have 135 on every hit we do, on average, same for this. And for the critical chance, if we were to normalize the critical chance over various hits, we would end up with 169 damage per hit on average. So even though in the beginning we looked at this and we had absolutely no idea what's what and what's the best option to maximize our damage, now that we quantified each option with super basic math that everybody learns very early in school, we know that from these 3 options, clearly this will give us more damage. So this is the second step of the framework. Looking at all these options and simply doing the calculation necessary to see the return. And I know what you're thinking, traveler, at this point. You think, I don't want to do math. I sat down to play a game to relax. I don't want to squeeze my brain and do math all the time. This is not supposed to be fun, and so on. Well, the good news for this is that this is basically all the math you need for most of the decisions of this type you will come across. Actually, by doing this exercise over and over again, this forces you to look into the deeper mechanics of the game and find out what all these mysterious terms mean for you in the game. So critical chance and elemental damage and how that's applied to different enemies and which ones have resistance and so on. Just by knowing this, you become naturally better at evaluating all your options in the future. So Yes, it is a little bit of work, but it's something that you use in everyday life. And actually, the interesting thing about this is that these two examples that we went through right now were just for picking skills in a skill tree as a player playing a game. You might be thinking that game design is entirely different from this process, but actually it's surprisingly similar. In game design, everything is a battle against time and resources. So we want to make all these amazing games, we want to make the best graphics ever and the best combat system ever, and we want to try to maximize every single aspect of the game, but we only have so much time and we only have so much budget and human resources and so on. So this is the exact process we have to go through when we're making these decisions in game design. When we're doing that in games design, or at least in my case, it looks something like, do I add one more ability for this class? Or do I add one new map for the game? Or do I add one new NPC? Or do I add one more weapon? All of these are good. All of these basically add content to the game and add things for the player to do when playing the game. So none of them is a bad option. None of them is something we shouldn't be doing. Notice how none of these options was, add zombies to the game. Since we decided that we don't want to include them, deciding to add them now would be a very strange decision. So all of these options sound good, but we want to know which one is the best investment of our time. So here's where we can quantify all these options and see how they would benefit the game. One more level to the game is expected to add X hours of gameplay time for the player. One more weapon doesn't necessarily add more hours to the game unless someone clears all the other weapons and wants to try this one as well, but adds more option. So perhaps it can include a greater part of the player population to cater to for this game. So maybe some people don't like melee combat and they would like a ranged combat option. So including the bow in our game might be a way to capture the attention of these users as well. Or adding more NPCs to the game will definitely add depth to the game and definitely add complexity. But the question is, will it have a better effect overall versus the bow option and the added level option? And of course, the question also happens for time. How much time would it take to add all these different things to the game, the NPC and the bow and so on? Assuming they all take the same time to add for one game designer and for the team, then we have to quantify which one of these options would provide the best and most value for our player. And for me, at least, when I went through this process and I was thinking about all these things in the context of games and game design, I noticed that this really is in no way different from the decisions we have to make in life. Just like in a game you say, do I want to have plus 10 attack in 3 skill points time, or do I want plus 1 attack speed in 1 skill points time? Both those options are good, but then the aspect of time comes in as well. And then you think about these two options in your mind and you say, well, perhaps getting the speed increase right now is better, or waiting for the damage increase is better. Again, by quantifying it through these options. But ultimately, the choice is yours, traveler. And understanding that I can apply this framework, this super simple 2-step framework to life, has insanely loosened my hands and made this decision process extremely easier. It has such a profound effect that nowadays the options that I would say, let me think about it. Do I want to do this project or that project? Do I want to go for vacation in this place or stay at home? All these things, all these options that normally people say, let me think about it and I'll answer to you next week. Why? In my case, I feel that there's no time to wait. There's no need to wait all this time to make a decision. You can make the decision basically instantly, or at least as soon as you have the information to quantify all the options in the decision. Anyway, I hope this helps. I hope this sheds some light in these mysterious and multiple options that we have to navigate every day in our games and also in real life. And I hope this is helpful for at least one other person out there. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and as always, have fun.